Hello and welcome to the channel. As always, like the video, and if you enjoyed the story, leave a comment on if you would want more. This fan fiction was not created by me, but in the description there is a link to the fanfic so you can show your support to the creator and read along. Without any more delay, let's dive into the story.
Things calmed down after Stain collapsed. It had taken a couple of moments, but ultimately Midoriya had been the first to react, moving to his side and checking his pulse. He'd confirmed aloud the man was still alive, barely, and that he was starting to slow down in his breathing. At this news the others all began to hurry to them, the pros carrying Stain away and positioning him in what was hopefully a less dangerous position. Endeavor just watched with apathy. Izuku was just glad he had a moment to catch his breath. As soon as the all-clear was given that it was safe, Momo had practically burst across the street, pulling him into a tight hug. The force of her grip, or rather the lack of it, was quite telling in how tired she still was though. While he'd never experienced it firsthand due to still not really having used his quirk or pushed it too far, he knew from Bakugo that quirk exhaustion was a bitch. He wrapped her in a tight hug, Todoroki approaching him a moment later with a look of worry but making no move to approach him. "Are you okay?" the heterochromatic teen inquired simply, and he nodded before taking Momo's hand and nodding towards Ida, who was looking toward them, and Gwen, who sat beside him with a hand on her leg. "Yeah, I'm fine. It's those two we need to focus on." With a hum, he gave his girlfriend's hand a squeeze as he began walking to the two injured individuals. "Should probably get you a checkup as well, just in case." The raven-haired teen began to complain, but a quick look from Midoriya using his best pout quietened her down before she could protest. "Well, I suppose it wouldn't hurt. I doubt it will be needed though. I apologize I didn't show up sooner, I was preoccupied with the Nomu like those that you saw," Todoroki said, and the Omnitrix bearer flashed him a more relaxed smile. "Hey, no worries. Everyone is alive and safe for now." Then he frowned as the finally all stopped, looking down to his blue-haired friend. "All alive, even if some of us really pushed the line. This isn't going to be something that is let go for a long time, is it?" the boy asked, as the sound of sirens approached. "Nope," Izuku said simply, before Gwen spoke up, directing her words to the greenette. "So Midoriya, I'm guessing you probably have a lot of questions you haven't gotten a chance to ask yet," the red-headed pro said, scratching the back of her neck nervously. "Yeah. At least as many questions as I have aliens," he said, eyes shifting to his watch. "Still, we should get you patched up first." "Oh, and Todoroki?" "Yes, Midoriya? If you don't mind and if you can convince your father, I'd appreciate it if you would come with us. I don't think the conflicts today are over quite just yet." With that last note, leaving concerned looks on the two other teenage boys and looks of discomfort on the girls, the ambulance pulled up and began to help. Ida and Native were loaded into the backs of them straight away. Gwen was taken onto a stretcher to get her wound patched up, the cut having turned out to be deeper than they realized, and after a small bout of arguing even Momo was taken into one of them just to be safe, in case her new trick had more ramifications than they realized. Midoriya and Todoroki meanwhile had to make their way on foot to the hospital, taking them the better part of an hour. The Fire and Ice team hadn't so much convinced his father as just ditched him, but seeing as this was essentially what the greenette was doing as well now, he wasn't exactly in a position to criticize him for it. Plus, who could blame him for ditching Endeavor? He worried about running into the plumbers on their way, but by a stroke of luck they managed to avoid any path where they might have run into them and continued on in silence. Edo Hamura was angry. More than angry, he was pissed. Those damn aliens had escaped his grasp, the only ones in his entire career, and his intern was completely missing. Where the hell is that child? He worried in the back of his mind that she had found him, but he held out hope that he would brush her off as crazy. He certainly had brushed this entire thing off as crazy when he'd been drafted in as a grunt so many years ago. After all, alternate dimensions and aliens were a hard pill to swallow. Especially all at once. "Sir!" Norio spoke up from nearby, pulling the Magister's attention. "Sorry to interrupt, I just wanted to inform you I finished my most recent check. The reality stone is still secure. Well, at least that's good news. Hamura muttered to himself, before turning his gaze to the corridors lined with prisoners. A cruel look came onto his face as he realized how he could relieve some of the stress from this whole scenario. I want you to punish the prisoners. Sir? They already had their daily shot dash. Did I stutter, Norio? And no, sir. The young man said, shaking his head and moving to one of the desks. Voltage? Go nuts. With a sigh, the plumber pressed in a few buttons and suddenly electric currents shot through every single cell in the prison. It was his own fault the conductoid escaped because he didn't change their punishment, but he wouldn't make that same mistake again once they were caught. A cacophony of pained screams reached his ears, bringing a smile to his face. My head hurts. A lot. Izuku groaned as he rested his head onto the back of the hospital seat he was sitting on backwards. Alternate universes, other Omnitrixes, and nights? This sounds like someone's writing a bad fanfiction about my life. Imagine how it feels from my perspective seeing you with my cousin's watch. Gwen pointed out from her bed. Beside her sat Yaoyorozu, who looked ready to pass out at any moment, and in the bed behind her was Ida. On the other side of Gwen's bed was where Midoriya sat, Todoroki beside him with his usually stoic gaze, but his eyes betrayed his deep confusion when you looked closely. I know it might be hard to believe, especially as you're new to all this. The redhead said with a sigh, shifting in her bed. They had put her in, just for the one night, to keep an eye on the wound due to a high likelihood of the blade stain used potentially causing an infection of some kind. Okay, hang on. The Omnitrix bearer said exasperatedly, taking out his phone and opening the camera. He pressed record and began again. Okay, just do me a favor and repeat all that. Are you recording me? Yes. Look, don't get me wrong, I can tell there's something fishy with the plumbers myself, but if anything does happen, I can't exactly say to the principal with a straight face, oh yeah, my internship ended early because they were from an alternate dimension, he pointed out, and the redhead nodded her head in acknowledgement. Alright, fair enough. Like I said before, I am from an alternate dimension where my cousin, Ben Tennyson, got the Omnitrix at 10 years old. She took a deep sigh, before continuing. What is important to know is that the plumbers in my dimension are genuinely good guys. Established in the 1700s by the founding fathers of America. They would help deal with hostile aliens, sealing them away for public safety. They weren't the only organization who knew about aliens though, there was also a group of people called the Forever Knights. This is so weird. Ida muttered under his breath nearby. He'd been given pain medication that was making a bit more open than usual. I thought Midoriya was the weirdest. Oh thanks. The greenette said with an unamused look, before Gwen's glare brought him back to reality. Like I was saying, the Forever Knights. They're an interesting group. They do think wholeheartedly they are the ones in the right in most cases, but they are hardly what you would call good. They believe anything remotely unearthly is bad and needs to be eradicated, while taking anything like alien technology for themselves. She then pulled out a notebook from one of her pockets, showing a page in it to the camera. It had a drawing of a man in armor in it holding an alien gun. So they have a horrible track record of imprisoning and even killing aliens who have done nothing wrong with zero regard. Back in my dimension, me and my cousin were battling them to retrieve an artifact before the Forever Knights called the Reality Stone. She flipped the page, showing an image similar to a cracked, oversized emerald. A misconception on how it worked led to the name. We were all under the impression it would reshape reality to how the user wanted it to be, but more accurately it transports the user to a dimension that will let them carry out their desire. The time it got used here though ended up with something a little different. When we found it, after we fought me and a knight by the name of Enoch both got our hands on it. Our conflicting desires lead to us being dropped down in this dimension, where it could go either way. So, we don't want them to get that stone then? Todoroki spoke up suddenly, having apparently just accepted the weirdness of this. They already have it. The real issue is that to go back, me and Enoch would have to have touched it at the same time. But I lucked out where he didn't. She said, sighing once more. His desires sent him into the past, around the same time quirks were beginning to show up. He used that to his advantage, along with the lack of real plumbers, to create his own version of them. After all, the plumbers were a part of the government while the Forever Knights were independent. He thought it would be a good start to change things. I instead got sent to this time, in the future, where coincidentally enough you have recently gotten your hands on the Omnitrix, a device I know a lot about. The thing is, I think he found the stone not too long after he ended up here and began this corrupted version of the plumber organization, but because he was the one who ended up in the past, he couldn't use it. If I try to use it now, as he will have passed away a long time ago now, I should be able to get back home. Still, before that I need to save the aliens who have been wrongly imprisoned by them. I couldn't just leave them. Midoriya couldn't help but smile just a small bit at that. That was one thing he could understand easily. That's where you come in, actually. I think Hamura will have heard about how much of a pain my cousin was with the Omnitrix, so he wanted to get you on his side first to be against aliens. Those aliens probably won't be too fond of humans, so me letting them go might not end well, but you could use the Omnitrix to show them you understand and are one of them, and make sure everything goes alright. With that, Izuku stopped recording inside. You know, not even a year ago I was just some quirkless kid trying to do my best to get by with a ridiculous dream. I pick up one watch from space and now I'm fighting interdimensional knights and saving aliens? You get used to it. The red-headed pro said with a small sympathetic smile. Sensing his exasperation, despite her tiredness that had kept her silent most of the time, Momo stood up and made her way to the greenette, giving him a gentle hug to reassure him. You're handling it well, Izuku. She reassured, and he held her arm as she hugged him. Thanks, Momo. You two are just too cute together. Gwen giggled, unable to help herself at the sight. The both blushed a little but smiled at the compliment before suddenly the redhead's expression became more serious. But we need to talk about our next move. Like it or not, there is a bunch of wrongly imprisoned aliens in there and we need to handle them as soon as possible. With that, they lapsed into silence for a moment as they all thought. Then suddenly, the Omnitrix bearer stood up and turned to the fire and ice team beside him. Todoroki. Beat me up. Excuse me? The heterochromatic teen blinked. What? No. Momo exclaimed, hugging him tighter. No one is beating you up. Gwen remained silent, mostly in confusion. Hang on, just hear me out. The greenette said, starting to gesticulate. The plumbers are probably aware something has happened, because they can't find me, but they won't know exactly what that something is yet. We can trick them into thinking I followed Tessa and Plum and got into a more serious fight that ended in a loss for me. That way they can't hold it against me that I didn't return, and I can work from the inside to find any information we need. And as soon as you have that, we can launch an attack on them. Yaoyorozu filled in, somewhat apprehensively. This seems more like work for real pros. Sadly, this Earth doesn't really recognize aliens exist, and as most of those aliens will have falsified crimes and nothing else on record, it's down to us. Gwen said, fixing them with a serious look before smiling. Teenagers fighting massive threats beyond them. Talk about nostalgic. I still don't know how I feel about this. I mean, I only have 12 aliens, what if another one is as abrasive as an apoplexian and I don't have a good alien for it? The greenette spoke his concerns aloud, and the redhead let out a surprised hum. Right, I forgot you wouldn't have access to the master control. Probably haven't met Azimuth either. The what and the who now? The master control is a setting in the Omnitrix. The pro explained with a smirk, studying Midoriya's inevitable reaction. We never managed to figure out how to get it out ourselves without the help of the watch's creator, so I can't help you get it though. As for what it entails, it completely eliminates the time limit. What? And it lets you change between alien forms on the fly. What? Oh, and every single alien ever added to the watch is unlocked. Won't do anything for aliens not already there, but should still be a large amount in your watch already. What? He ended up saying it aloud, before slapping his hand over his mouth in embarrassment while the girls giggled and Todoroki just looked as stoic as ever. His eyes had narrowed a bit though. He let out a groan. That is literally the one major drawback that had everyone hung up, and I could have not even had that issue this entire time? Basically. Gwen confirmed, amused before stretching in the bed she was in. As for Azimuth, he is the creator of the Omnitrix. At least in my dimension he is, but even if he is the creator here I have no way to find him. Sorry. Well, at least now I have a name. Midoriya said, rubbing his face against his hands. Maybe JJ knows something. Maybe it won't even matter. So, anyone have any objections to me going back to the plumbers? Yes. Momo said with a pout. I don't like the idea of you getting your cute face messed up. He blushed at that, her tiredness making her just blurt out the phrase, but her concern did make him smile. Sorry, but we have to. I promise, as soon as this is all over we'll go on that date, yeah? That will make up for it. I guess. Wait. Suddenly Momo blinked, looking up to her short-term mentor for the past day. What about me and Izuku's internships? Ida will be in the hospital but us. I'm sending the video to All Might. The Greenette spoke up before Gwen could. He should be able to figure something out with the principal. At a guess, I think we'll be brought back early for extra lessons. Well, I suppose that's the best I can ask for. The raven-haired teen sighed, standing up. I don't like it, but if we're going to sell it, I don't have anything else to say. Great, then someone smack me. Izuku said all too eagerly. Todoroki took the offer, the sound reverberating off the walls as the one-for-all holder let out a pained cry. That's for nearly bursting my eardrums in the sports festival. Did he just hold a grudge? Izuku flew shakily through the air in the form of Chiller, veering off to the left every so often and dropping lower and lower, clearly struggling to maintain flight. At least that's how he was making it look from an outsider perspective, not that it seemed he actually needed to sell it. No one at the moment seemed to be around, distracted by the utter chaos of the night. That worked fine by him, as he didn't want to have to worry about getting in trouble for using his powers atop the rest of the things that had happened that night. He spotted the street with the entrance to the plumber base and took in a shaky breath before letting his wings give out. He dropped fast to the ground, turning his body incorporeal at the last moment, so he fell through the earth and waited until he came out in the main room of the underground complex, turning back to normal and slowing his descent at the absolute last moment so as to avoid a painful crash landing. Well, a more painful one anyways. The sound of many soldiers reaching for their guns reached his ears and he groaned as he tapped the Omnitrix symbol, turning back to normal. Once he did, he heard a shout and felt his body get rolled over by a concerned-looking Hamura. There you are, kid. Holy shit, your face. Doing his best not to let his new distrust of the man creep into his tone, he simply groaned again in agreement. Had a friend. 4 arms. Caught me off guard. A Tetramand? Damn it. His face was bruised and even had a busted lip. Todoroki had some pretty powerful strikes when you were deliberately avoiding defending against them. It wasn't like he was beaten within an inch of his life or anything, but he definitely had looked better. The heterochromatic teen had tried to stop, and Momo had been all for it ending as soon as possible, but Izuku had convinced them just one more strike should mean it would definitely be sold. His body kind of hated him for the decision, which was absolutely fair really. His girlfriend hadn't been all that pleased either. Come on kid, let's get you to the recovery wing. Magister Hamura said, helping the Greenette to his feet and taking him down the hall towards a new room. Inside it was pure white, with a woman walking around inside. Hey Ko, new patient. Oh Jesus. The woman exclaimed upon seeing the Greenette. She was a blonde woman, with long back-length hair and an M-shaped parting for her bangs. Her eyes were a cool ice blue and her skin was pale. Did you guys go too far in training again? No, this was a field mission. Hamura excuses, getting a look of exasperation from the blonde. A child? Seriously? What next? You gonna give a 4-year-old a gun? She asked sarcastically as she took the Omnitrix bearer up onto a bed and put her hands out towards him. To his surprise, they lit up with a golden glow and he felt his bruises start to fade and his lip begin to heal. As it finished, he felt better than he did even before fighting Stain. So they still use quirks then? Seems kinda hypocritical, but good to know. It was an unexpected development. I thought there was no reason to say otherwise, but now, I see quite clearly he won't be going out on another mission anytime soon. Hamura said with a seemingly sympathetic gaze to his intern. It took a lot more willpower than it should have for Izuku not to respond, "You have no idea." Well, either way, it was a quick fix. Good thing you didn't have anything more serious or we might have had some real issues. The woman said with a kind smile, before shooing them both off. Now, try not to end up back here. We won't. Hamura said, gesturing for Izuku to follow him. They began walking towards "You should go rest, Midoriya. Healing quirks aren't perfect. Nothing works better than basic rest to recover." "Yes, sir," was all the greenette offered in reply, eager to get to the room he had been staying and finally getting around to putting this entire situation behind him. As he walked, one might have noticed his eyes studying the halls intensely. If they saw him at the right moment, they would have seen the small smirk on his face as he approached his room, having seen pipes and vents aplenty throughout the halls. Easy ways to sneak around if you happen to be the right size to do so. He just had to wait until the right moment. "I'll be in the main area, and Norio will be knocking about someplace. Just come find us if you need something, or go back to the infirmary if you notice anything weird after that whole healing thing," the blonde man instructed, getting a nod from the Omnitrix bearer before he set off. "See ya, kid. We'll get those aliens yet, don't worry about it." "Yeah, not if I have anything to say about it," Izuku thought, as the man left, frown deepening. He closed his door and took a quick look around his room. A clock up in the corner caught his eye. 8:24 p.m., that gives me a few hours to think this over, and get ready. With that thought, he took a deep breath. Well, if nothing else, might as well train one for all a little, see how much I can use now. Izumid 2-2-1-0-0. The Omnitrix lit up. Recalibrating, it announced. A sort of ticklish sensation ran through the teen for just a moment before the watch piped up once more. Body now able to process 5% of one for all. Transferring power. Alternate forms now able to use up to 95% of one for all. With that, the watch went back to normal. 5%, huh? Izuku muttered, before taking a deep breath and focusing on the power, calling upon it. He felt it through his body and began to move with the power up. His face lit up as he felt the speed at which he moved. Huh. Now this is a power-up. Not that the 3% previously hadn't been useful, but it was more like being a peak physical human instead of superhuman. It wasn't much, especially compared to his alien forms, but he'd be damned if he started complaining. With that thought, he began to focus on testing out his new base power as he tried to kill the time. It was half an hour to midnight when Izuku finally decided to make his move, having exhaustively trained with his new power as best he could without any real proper way to test it beyond the speed in his room. Any training for such a power was better than nothing though. Shaking his head, he pulled out his phone and searched through his contacts to find Todoroki. Investigating. Meet in half hour. Location being sent. Todoroki, Midoriya. It's Gwen. Get info on Stone, any codes or such needed to release prisoners and find a way to disable electricity, so defenses are lessened. You got it. With no more stalling, he put down his phone, opened the door and pulled up the Omnitrix, scrolling through the selections to find Brainiac, pressing it in and shrinking in a flash of green light. He headed towards the now towering doorframe, running out into the corridor. He looked around quickly, making sure no one was about to see before he launched at a nearby pipe, scrambling up it and getting towards one of the vents. He quickly unscrewed one of the openings and jumped inside, following it around towards the main room in a sprint. He had to come out a little early as there was no entrance straight into the room like there was in the corridor just preceding the room. He had to hang around for a moment, as Norio walked past. There was a brief moment of panic when the small frog-like alien lost his footing and almost tumbled right into the brunette's hair, but he managed to stay in the air, watching the plumber leave before he leapt down to the ground and ran into the main room. It wasn't empty, but it was far sparser than earlier, with only 2 people present. 2 random plumbers the transformed teen didn't recognize. Let's see. He jumped up to the closer one who didn't seem to be particularly attentive at the moment, noting a cup of coffee on the table that looked like it was freshly made. With a small amount of guilt, he began pushing against the mug, ignoring the burning sensation on his tiny fingers and jumping out of sight at the last moment. It landed on the man's lap, causing him to let out a pained cry as he jumped to his feet. Fuck. He shouted in pain, hoping away and trying to pull the fabric further from his skin without ripping it off to avoid the burning pain. The other plumber, a woman, turned to him with a worried look before looking unimpressed. Seriously? Oh fuck. Help! He asked, getting the woman to roll her eyes. She looked back at the room for a moment before sighing and helping him out with a shrug of her shoulders. You seriously should be able to go to the recovery wing by yourself. You're going to get us both in trouble. The woman complained, even as she took him with. Izuku waited until they were out of the room before letting out a small, somewhat tinny laugh. That was way easier than it should have been. He chuckled, not complaining as he jumped up to the main computer. His features quickly became more serious as he began pressing in numbers. Still, don't have long. Only 5 minutes at best, which means no time for enhance. Got to do this the old-fashioned way. He began typing away, his enhanced intelligence and form's innate understanding of technology helping him quickly bypass the computer's security and get inside. Too easy. Let's see. He hummed, scanning the info that went by his eyes. The first thing he managed to find was the electricity kill switch. Looks like, if I just insert a small script, I can put it on a timer to fail. The prison seems to be on a completely different system though, so we'll need to find a different way to free the other aliens. With that thought and the script put in place, he quickly set to work on finding information about the aliens. So many different species. Oh, there we go. A skill switch for every cell at once, absolutely perfect. He noticed something in the files for the prisoners, opening it and feeling his eyes went wide. They kept the ships each alien arrived in on the lowest level? That's really useful. Did Gwen think of that or? Well, good to know either way. He chose to ignore the sudden feeling of not being as prepared as he'd like creeping up on him. He finally focused on the most important detail, the supposed dimension-hopping artifact. Reality stone, reality stone, reality stone. He had to skim through a few files, but eventually he found one detailing the level of security assigned to a room near the same hangar holding the alien ships they would have to go to. To say it was excessive was an understatement. No way with that much security that the stone isn't in there. He smiled, finally having all the information he needed to get. He quickly put everything back to the original settings and jumped down just in time for the return of the 2 from earlier, both looking like they'd seen a ghost. Geez, he was so angry. The man muttered aloud, as Izuku bolted past him and the woman. What did we even do? Abandon our post because you're a crybaby. Well then why did you go with me? Do you want me to punch you? What? No. Then shut it. The small frog-like alien snickered, jumping up the walls into the vents and running back. Thankfully on his way there was no Norio or any other person to avoid as he came out outside his room and changed back to normal. He grabbed his phone as he closed the door behind him, relaying the information to Todoroki and Gwen, before looking around. He spotted his hoverboard in the corner. He grabbed it, before sighing. Well, I guess it's a good thing I don't have too much stuff to carry around at least once this is all said and done. A part of him wondered for a moment if they shouldn't have waited a few more days to prepare, but he squashed the thought almost immediately. Every second there were people wrongly imprisoned for no good reason that went by was unacceptable. He couldn't add more to that. Looking to his watch, he cycled through his aliens as he thought about how he himself should proceed as soon as the assault began. They have a lot of countermeasures for my aliens. Hopefully a lot will be negated by the lack of power, but better safe than sorry. He stopped on one of his two new ones, the silhouette strikingly similar to Tessa. A conductoid transformation. A smirk crossed his face as an idea settled in. Clearly, they aren't as well equipped to deal with them as other aliens, and that's in normal circumstances. I'm willing to bet they're even less prepared for a one-for-all powered one. With that thought, he left the selection on the conductoid and went back to training one for all like he had been earlier. He was going to need every little bit of preparation he could get. A deep frown was set on Izuku's face when the time finally came. 3 minutes to midnight and he was storming down the halls with intention, no plumbers getting in his way thankfully. He'd told Gwen and Todoroki he'd send a signal when it was time for them to come in, not disclosing what said signal was beyond, it will be obvious. He wasn't sure he liked the idea of the redhead fighting again so soon with her leg, but he knew he couldn't stop her and he got the impression she was like him. When her mind was set on doing something there would be no stopping her. She said something about healing faster than normal people as well, which had helped a little bit even if he didn't understand why she didn't count as normal. He soon enough found himself for the third time in the main room, where he was surprised to find it totally empty. And it set him on edge. He was expecting people he was going to have fight. Still he cautiously made his way to where the entrance elevator was to let in Gwen and Todoroki. As he stepped towards it though, a blast of energy flew past his head and hit the wall, making him jump as he turned to see Hamura at the main computer. A blaster in his hand, and scowl on his face. "Why aren't you in your room?" "Huh, and here I was thinking I was going to have to set off some alarms to find you, sir." "This works better though," the greenette said, feigning innocence while ignoring the question which just seemed to annoy the stocky man. "So you met her?" Hamura said, tapping a button on the computer and bringing up on the display several texts. The Omnitrix bearer immediately recognized them as his own, eyes widening slightly. "Crap! They were monitoring my texts? Wait, why didn't I consider that? So much for Brainiac being the smartest alien. They have more than likely already been intercepted and taken down outside. So, have anything to say for yourself?" Izuku sighed, facing Hamura fully with a scowl of his own. "Well, no point in wasting time now. You said you didn't know the escaped alien's name." "Huh? Well dash. I'm confident you were lying," Izuku said, watching as the Magister shrugged it off like it meant nothing. He felt his anger rise. "If you can tell me her name, I'll concede I made a mistake. I'll help you stop the attack and even let you throw me in a cell if you need to. So tell me, what was her name?" All lies in reality, but he wanted to make a point and it would be much more effective this way. An incentive. "I don't know," Hamura admitted, face relaxed as if he didn't see any issue in that fact. Izuku's glare hardened. "You don't know?" He let off a growl that sounded more like it would have come from wrath instead of his human form. "Tessa." "Huh? Her name is Tessa," he explained simply. "She is another person, like any of us, just as important as any of us, and you couldn't even be bothered to remember her name." The Magister pointed his gun forward as Izuku pulled up the Omnitrix, ready to slam the dial down. "This entire organization ends today. I'm confident now, do you know why?" "Why?" He slammed in the watch, his new alien form appearing. He was tall and sleek, a full black body with white belly. His eye was a bright green and he had 2 conductors instead of the 1. And he was already sparking. Hamura fired a blast at the perceived attack, which the new alien quickly absorbed. "Because you didn't remember," he growled, firing a blast of his own right at the man. And so it began. Hamura ducked and weaved around the blasts fired his way by Izuku, many getting too close for comfort before he dived for cover nearby, firing a few blasts at the teen, which were promptly absorbed once more. Ha! This is awesome. The alien chuckled, before shaking his head and his eye narrowed as his more serious side took over. Thanks for helping me get used to this form first, Hamura. I think it's time though that dash. He didn't get a chance to finish as a small device suddenly flew out from cover and Izuku's eyes widened as he realized it was a grenade. Doing the first thing that came to mind, he fired off a blast at the floor and rocketed into the sky, before laughing nervously when it exploded as he realized he was hovering. Can I use this to fly? So cool, focus, Izuku. He dropped back down to the ground, charging a blast up. Nice try, he said, before firing off his blast and causing the console he hit to explode, the plumber tumbling forward and rolling across the ground. The man groaned but made no move to get up. Once Izuku was satisfied the man was incapacitated for now, he turned his attention to the entrance and aimed another blast, firing it before launching off the ground and flying through the smoke. As he traveled up the elevator shaft, he called upon One for All and felt a familiar fire flowing through him, crackles of energy appearing around him as his eye glowed. His body became coated in a blue energy-like substance, his eye the only part remaining its initial color. He shot out the top of the smoke, and felt a whole bunch of energy swirling around him, absorbed from the streetlights without even trying as he flipped, coming down to the street. He smiled wide at the sight he saw, various plumbers all around having been defeated and either encased in ice or restrained with pink light constructs. There were only 3 soldiers left, staring down Gwen and Todoroki, who looked no worse for wear despite the ambush. Izuku used his energy blast to rocket down near one of the soldiers, delivering a strong kick to their head and knocking them out before blasting another down the street. The final one turned in surprise at his arrival and opted to try to punch him upon seeing he was a conductoid. The strike landed but the teen was barely fazed. The soldier let out a pain cry as his body began to violently shudder as though he was being electrocuted, before he dropped to the ground. Nice work. About time you showed up, Gwen said, sighing as she noted a small chunk of her clothes had been destroyed by one of the plumbers. Annoying blasters. We should hurry, Todoroki said simply, not even waiting for the other two as he hopped down the hole in front of him, ice forming on his way down. Gwen looked to the alien teen confused, who just shrugged and followed after him. As soon as he landed back in the room, using the energy beams to slow his descent at the last moment, he looked up and let out an irritated shout once he realized Hamura was no longer in place. Dang it! I knew I should have tied him up. Why didn't you? His heterochromatic friend asked as he took in his new surroundings. I knew you two were being ambushed, I didn't know if I had time to waste on that. He explained simply, when floating down beside him. We'll have to follow him, we can't let him get too far ahead. He began to run ahead but before he could get more than a few steps Gwen called out to him. Midoriya, wait. Me and Todoroki will go after him, you need to focus on the prisoners. But Dash. You're our best shot at making sure they listen to us. We'll be fine, okay? So focus on the aliens. Gwen commanded, and Izuku nodded with a small frown, knowing she was right. The 3 of them came out into a hallway, splitting up as they went. Izuku headed for the main complex while his friends disappeared down a different path. He burst into the prison area, knowing he'd have to descend a few floors to get to the controls he needed. There! Get him! A voice shouted, and the one-for-all bearer looked up to see a group of plumbers getting ready to fire at him. He readied himself with a grin, absorbing the blasts the second they were fired before pointing his hand forward. Oh crap! He fired, instantly dealing with the group of plumbers before he jumped over the railing and flew down to the area with the main controls, blowing the door open and running inside. Another plumber had been there, reaching for a rifle but a quick strike to the neck combined with his current taser-like body instantly downed him. He turned his attention to the main control console and hummed. Alright, let's see, got to be one of these buttons. Aha! Finding the one he was looking for, he could only grin victoriously as sirens started to sound and he heard the sound of various cells being opened. He then pressed down a button nearby, where he spotted a mic and cleared his throat. "All right then. Calling all those wrongly imprisoned. My name is Izuku Midoriya. I'm on your side, I promise. Just look for a conductoid covered in blue energy and that's me. Make your way to the bottom floor ASAP." With that, he backed away from the controls and hurried back out into the main area to see chaos. More plumbers were arriving, but now all kinds of aliens, some he recognized and others he didn't, fighting alongside one another against their captors. He aimed a few blasts around, providing quick moments of assistance to the fights closest to him before he leapt over the balcony and twirled in the air, firing when and where he could with surprisingly good aim. Whether that was one for all or a natural talent of a conductoid, Izuku didn't know. He landed on the second to last floor, a massive group of plumbers blocking the way forward. "Take this, scumbag." "Really, I'm the scumbag?" Izuku thought, slightly irritated, but his attention was quickly brought to the massive cannon-like blaster they had in their grasp. It fired off a massive beam and Izuku barely raised his hands in time, the energy of it all pouring into his hands and leaking back out, adding to the field of energy around his body. The plumbers seemed to realize they were screwed at the same moment, as Izuku raised his hand and they gulped. "You know, I really need to think up some names for my alien super moves. Might as well start now. How does pinpoint pain sound?" he asked, his fingers firing off various small blasts that all hit each plumber separately but with enough power to blast them all back and destroy their weapon, dealing with them in moments. The Omnitrix bearer shook his head with a frown. "No, sounds too dark. More like something Kakin would call it." "Hey, are you the guy from that announcement?" a new voice asked, getting the teen to turn and see various aliens approaching, an alien of the same species as Pyroform. Behind her, Izuku spotted various aliens beginning to close in and up on a balcony. "Yeah, I am." He nodded as he fired a blast at the plumber who thought he'd managed to stay out of sight, knocking him out instantly. When no new aliens showed up, he looked around the group that had gathered, noting there was essentially a small armada of them now. "Is that everyone? Seems like a small number for the amount of cells." "A lot of us. Don't make it." An alien from a species Izuku didn't recognize said. He looked a lot like a kind of plant though, with a single eye and pods sprouting out of his spine, with tendrils for feet. Izuku let out a small growl before shaking his head. No point getting overly angry right now, they needed him to focus. "All right, everyone pay attention and please, stay calm," he ordered, standing up tall as he let one for all fade away and he heard a familiar beeping sound, the Omnitrix symbol flashing red. Beep. 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 BWOO. A red flash engulfed them for a moment before Izuku's slightly shaky human form appeared, his body still recovering partially from having utilized one for all. "Ah. He's a human. He dash. Calm down," he shouted again, putting his hands up defensively as some of the aliens began to stalk towards him with glares. "Just let me explain, okay?" They seemed reluctant, but any who wanted to attack him outright were held back by other calmer aliens. Izuku gave them all a thankful nod before clearing his throat and pointing to his watch. "All right, first the fact I was a conductoid moments ago. This is the Omnitrix. It allows me to turn into any alien species as far as I'm aware, though I suppose I am the alien to you all. It also means I understand what it's like to walk a mile in some of your shoes, and as I've been kidnapped before, if briefly. I just want you to all understand I'm on your side." He began explaining, thankful as he watched most of them settle down, though they still seemed less than thrilled. "I get it if you don't trust me, the plumbers have hardly made a great first impression for humans. I have a friend, Gwen, though who has been monitoring them for a while and we finally had a chance to free you all, hence why we're here now. I know where they are keeping a whole bunch of ships for you to take and use to escape, we just got to get there. So are you all in?" There was a moment of silence as the group looked among themselves, before a Tetraman sighed and walked forward. "Anything's better than being tortured, so we may as well try it." Various other aliens voiced their agreement and Izuku fixed them all with a smile, happy he was able to get through to them without too much hassle. Before he could say for them to go, however, the Omnitrix suddenly shot out a yellow light, scanning the group at once. Hey! What the? What are you doing? Scan incomplete. Multiple DNA signatures present. Cannot create uncorrupted data. The watch announced, getting its wearer to roll his eyes. Of course, because it's not like that would have been useful or anything. Sorry about that. It tries to scan any life forms it doesn't already have in it. I can't stop it from doing it, but it doesn't have any real effect on you. He explained, shrugging before he turned to the passage nearby and began to walk forward. We shouldn't waste any more time. The longer we stand around, the more time the plumbers have to try to stop us. Let's go. He took off down the hall, the aliens following not far behind. They managed to get a fair few of the halls without any issue until they came across a group of plumbers, who opened fire as soon as they set eyes on them. Izuku reacted as quickly as possible, calling upon one for all as was timed out and dodging the blasts just barely. He managed to rush one of the soldiers, knocking them out, and a fireball suddenly hit the wall near him, exploding and distracting the plumbers long enough for the Tetraman to grab them, knocking them out. There was only one left, who recovered just in time to duck out the way of the alien and dived for a nearby switch, flicking it and having a steel wall crash down in front of them. The four-armed alien rushed at the barrier, delivering strike after powerful strike but not managing to really do any damage to it. Really need to find a way to deal with the timeout. Izuku groaned, knowing he could get through if he could just get access to his aliens again. Move! A somewhat out-of-breath sounding voice asked, and the teen looked to the source only to be surprised at what he saw. An alien that looked like something halfway between a fish, a monster, and a mermaid stood there with massive jaws and a lure on top of its head similar to an anglerfish. It only had what seemed to be a tail that had come undone to reveal legs covering its modesty. Beside him, a bright orange furry alien that was salivating and growling, that had no eyes and was on all fours much like a dog pawed at the ground. The two hurried forward, taking chunks out the metal with their jaws like it was nothing. Note to self, never put your head near either of their mouths because holy crap. The Omnitrix lit up again, scanning the two. Vulpimancer DNA sample acquired. Pisxis Volan DNA acquired. It announced as the two made short work of their barrier, spitting out the pieces onto the ground and leaving the greenette stunned. There. The fish-like creature said, clearly struggling to talk for some reason. We should hurry, if we have a Volan here, especially near me. Izuku heard the alien that resembled pyroform mutter. What did JJ say they were called? Pyronites? Looks like our plumber friend has gotten a little further ahead. Izuku let out a frustrated sigh as he saw another barrier not too far ahead and the plumber had completely disappeared. Damn. I can't keep doing that for every door. The fish-like alien muttered in annoyance. Hold on it, a new voice, that Izuku could only describe as grubby, said. He turned, eyes widening slightly as he saw a rather odd sight. A small somewhat fat green alien with big eyes and buck teeth stood before them, walking up the rubble created by the Vulpikmancer and Volan. It only got weird when the new alien literally ate the scrap, swallowing it whole with its somewhat creepy long tongue. With puffed out cheeks and a glowing stomach, he waddled forth and spit out an energy blast that destroyed the door. What in the... What? The greenette had no idea what to think, mouth agape at the sight. The short small alien started eating more of the rubble again in preparation once more while the Omnitrix kicked to life again. Gourmand DNA acquired. With a quick shake of his head, Izuku turned his focus back to the task at hand and followed the gourmand as it blasted its way through another door, then another and another before they finally came upon the room they were looking for. Izuku took the lead at this point, ushering everyone in as he himself took a quick look around the hangar. It seemed to be placed upon a runway, at the end of which the greenette could see the ocean, which explained how they'd managed to move the ships here without being seen. Isn't Ajui's internship somewhere out that way? I wonder if she'll see any of these ships. Izuku watched as the group began separating, some heading for specific ships and others forming groups before deciding on one as well, all getting ready to finally depart. All of them finally safe from the clutches of water. Need water. A voice cried out, pulling the teen's attention to the fish-like alien from earlier who collapsed forward, clutching at his throat. Can't breathe. Hey! You need water? Izuku asked confused, looking up to one of the other nearby aliens who was looking around for a solution. Volans can't breathe for long without training themselves once they're away from water. He's asphyxiating. One of them explained, panicked. Izuku made to grab the alien, intending to bolt for the water and to drop him in for a minute, but before he could. Good thing dead creatures don't need air. Izuku whirled around, seeing Norio holding a blaster aimed straight towards the alien. Then he fired. Izuku had to think about a lot in the span of less than a second. As Norio's finger pulled the trigger, and the end of the blaster lit up red, preparing to shoot out a bolt of energy, it registered in his head he was still timed out as far as he knew. The energy blast finally formed and shot towards the Volan, everything feeling slow. He almost felt like he was back on Vilgax's ship for a moment. Even if he could use the Omnitrix, he'd have no time to select a suitable alien, and getting a bad selection was simply not an option here. The blast was almost upon the alien and Izuku's body suddenly glowed as green lightning started bursting off of him. He had only one choice. One for all, plus ultra base. To everyone else, all they saw for a moment was a green bolt of lightning rush towards the red bolt of energy and the fish-like alien, before suddenly said alien disappeared from sight. What the? Norio looked around, spotting Izuku had managed to in an instant get the asphyxiating escapee towards a group of aliens climbing onto one of the ships. Get him the water he needs now. I'll hold Norio off. Izuku called before disappearing again, reappearing beside the plumber to try and kick the blaster out his hand. Norio reacted at the last moment, dropping the gun and ducking, avoiding the kick before pushing Izuku back and pointing a second gun at the freckled teen's chest, which had seemed to magically appear in his hand. Izuku wasn't to be stopped so easily though. Barely dodging the blast fired by a few centimeters, he rushed back in, sliding on the ground and trying to strike the new gun out of the man's hand with a palm strike. He thought he had succeeded for a moment when he saw the blaster go flying, only for the soldier to suddenly smack his hands against both sides of his head before he could move, making his ears ring as suddenly two more blasters were pointed in his face. So you have a duplication quirk of some sort. Izuku realized as he stumbled back, surprised by the strength of the man. He was sure One for All had upped his durability, yet his head still hurt like he'd taken 2 baseball bats to either side. Out the corner of his eyes, he was happy to at least see most of the aliens were escaping on the ships, the plumber too distracted with him to stop them. Norio smirked as he put his hands on the trigger. Perfect to avoid being disarmed. He fired, only for Izuku to disappear again, dodging the blasts and suddenly zapping across the room, bouncing off of walls and 1 or 2 ships before managing to come in and land a punch on Norio's cheek, making the man stumble back before he immediately raced to fire again, hitting the wall behind where Izuku had been. 2 strong arms wrapped around the plumber's neck as he felt a foot come into his leg hard, forcing him to kneel. Then I just have to knock you out before you can fire them. Izuku's eyes went wide though, as a moment later he saw the older man's weapons tossed into the air, before an elbow struck his stomach and he was forced to pull back, jumping out of the way of 2 sudden blasts from the thrown blasters that landed, firing randomly. Norio took one of the blasts to the side of his leg, making him let out a cry of pain before he quickly aimed and fired 2 brand new guns again at the freckled teen, who quickly ran backwards, just avoiding the blasts as they hit the ground before he flipped back onto the wall and jumped forward at speed, missing the soldier with his new punch by inches as he predicted it incoming. Izuku grinned though as his feet landed on the ground, and then he leaped high into the air, briefly touching the roof and completely dodging the final blasts Norio had tried to get him with, cracking the roof with the force he jumped off it as he landed one solid strike right into Norio's head. The final 2 blasters dropped out of the man's hands onto the floor as he fell to his knees, before collapsing with a groan. Izuku let out a small chuckle as he kicked one blaster away and picked up the other, keeping it pointed at the plumber just in case. Wow, never gotten to use one for all full on in a fight like that before in my human state. Thanks Norio, it was a real blast. The man groaned again, coughing slightly. Izuku shrugged. Yeah, you're right. That was bad even for me. Izuku looked around, breathing a sigh of relief when he spotted a small group of aliens who had taken the Valan to the water at the end of the hangar. Izuku noticed there were only a few ships left, which meant there'd still be some left over apparently. Izuku felt sick for a moment knowing why not every ship would be gone, turning back to glare at Norio and keep an eye on him when suddenly a loud crashing noise sounded out, making him jump and look up to see the wall ahead of them starting to crack and crumble. What the dash? Then finally it gave away and Izuku's jaw dropped when the second biggest robot he'd seen since he'd gotten the Omnitrix crashed through the ceiling onto the floor, beaten in size only by the zero-pointer. In fact, it was roughly half the size of the zero-pointer. It looked like a massive medieval knight for the most part, with a tunic and gloves all made of metal, along with massive spiked pauldrons on the shoulders. The helmet was particularly interesting as it had a golden mask of sorts depicting a stoic face covered by a gray metal cowl. The eyes seemed to be pure black voids and it completely split right at the center. The most notable thing that made Izuku breathe a sigh of relief though was seeing the robot was covered entirely on side with ice and was being bombarded with pink energy discs. The face opened up and a somewhat battered Magister Hamura fell out onto the floor coughing. Midoriya! There you are. Todoroki called out, stepping over the rubble and landing on the scene. I see your mission went smoothly. Yeah, whoa. Izuku had to suddenly jump back when a new energy disc came flying straight towards him. Instead of hitting him however it arced down and smashed into Norio, who the Omnitrix bearer hadn't noticed had been starting to rise. Thanks, Gwen. No problem. Just try to pay a little more attention. Gwen said with a slightly cheeky smirk. Guess I missed the boss battle, huh? Izuku asked, pointing at the giant robot. Did not expect to see a robot like that turn up. It was certainly a surprise, that's for sure. Todoroki said, seemingly completely disinterested. Nothing that difficult to deal with overall though. Several minutes earlier. Hey Todoroki, can I ask you something? Gwen asked as she and the heterochromatic teen sprinted through the halls, being lucky enough to avoid any plumbers for the most part. Any small groups of them that did appear were always either almost instantly frozen or knocked out by an exploding energy disc from the red-headed pro. I suppose. The teenager hummed simply as they rounded a corner and started descending some stairs. You were in the sports festival with Midoriya, so you've known him for a while, right? Not for as long or as well as Yaoyorozu or Ida. The fire and ice teen said simply. Why? I was just curious if you knew anything more about how he got the Omnitrix. Some of the aliens he has are completely different from what my cousin had when he first got it, and his watch's design is a lot more like the final watch Ben got. Gwen explained, before halting as two plumbers rounded the corner. Before they could even raise their guns to the two intruders, Gwen had caught one of them in a tight grasp with a magic construct, smashing them into the wall and then into their partner hard enough they both hit the other wall and collapsed. Not even fazed, Gwen turned to Todoroki as they continued running on. Just makes me curious what other differences there might be. Well, I don't have the answers to that. We plumber escaping straight ahead. Todoroki suddenly called and Gwen looked forward, gritting her teeth when she saw the retreating form of Hamura. That's the leader. Come on, let's put an end to this already. The two picked up the pace, Gwen's hands constantly coated in a pink glow and Todoroki ready to throw a barrage of ice and fire forward at any moment if need be. They were almost stopped at one point when metal walls started falling down on them, but Gwen made short work of them with her most powerful attacks and they soon followed Hamura into a dark room that seemed empty for a moment. Where did he? Miss Tennyson, look up. Todoroki said, with actual shock clear in his voice for once. The redhead did and she gaped at what she saw. A giant robot designed to look like the forever knight she fought when she was 10 years old, chained up to the walls. Oh God, not another one of those. She groaned as she saw it start coming to life. Hamura must have already gotten into the control area when the two had walked in. We need to stop that thing as soon as possible. On it! The team beside her shouted, running forward and stomping his foot into the ground, a massive barrage of ice traveling straight towards the robot. It had fully awoken at this point though and tore its arm from one of the chains holding it in a surprisingly fluid motion, backhanding the ice and completely shattering it. Todoroki blinked. Ah. That is problematic. Well, Gwendolyn. So nice of you to show your face. Now I can finally get rid of you for good. It may be a work in progress but it's hardly anything to sneeze at. Hamura chuckled from inside the robot, bolting forward with thunderous footsteps and trying to crush the two. Gwen's hand shot out, creating a massive mana shield that blocked the robot's strike. It cracked somewhat under the pure pressure however, and the dimension-hopping woman knew she'd have to come up with something else fast. She quickly redirected her construct so it changed from a shield into something more akin to a massive whip, wrapping around the robot's arms as she bolted forward, platforms of mana appearing under her feet and letting her race higher into the air while keeping the focus on her. This gave Todoroki a chance to attack more freely, sending another barrage of ice out that froze the massive machine's right leg. Its free fist simply smashed into the ice, breaking most of it before it tried to strike Gwen, who leapt atop the fist and dropped over the side. She ran forward on another platform of mana once she was beneath the fist, the whip of mana following her as she maneuvered herself in specific ways. Todoroki quickly understood what she was attempting to do when he saw the whip was starting to tie up the robot's hands, preventing it from attacking as freely. This also gave Todoroki more of an opportunity to strike with the villain distracted. It had become apparent attacking from his current position would hardly give him any advantage though. Looking to the nearby wall, he took inspiration from Gwen's mana platforms and the crystal platforms he'd seen Izuku use as crystallize in the past. He'd have to be more careful than those two, but they gave him an idea. He ran at the wall, ice starting to form beneath his feet that shot out in two directions. One path went out towards the wall, traveling up it, while the other path started making its way towards the gargantuan machine, starting to rise into platforms of ice. He used the ice on the wall as a sort of climbing frame, his left hand melting holes into the ice for him to grip into and climb up, eventually reaching the height of the first platform where a bridge of ice shot out for him to travel across. Once he reached the edge of the first platform, a second platform appeared and he leapt onto it, incredibly thankful he'd requested shoes that would prevent him from slipping on his ice for his costume. He started rising higher and higher with each platform until he could eventually jump and land on the villain robot's shoulder, seeing its hands had been completely tied up. That didn't stop it however, as it started struggling and very suddenly broke free of the restraints, its eyes glowing red as two lasers suddenly shot out towards Gwen, who barely had time to make a shield before she was thrown off her feet, hitting against the wall and falling to the ground. "Miss Tennyson!" Todoroki exclaimed, before seeing one of the hands then coming to crush him. He gritted his teeth, ice forming at his foot and rapidly expanding out, creating a blockade between the shoulder and fist, freezing the hand in place. It struggled, trying to break the ice, and Todoroki tried to blast the face with fire, hoping he could melt through and tear the plumber out from inside the cockpit. The face had to be split like that for a reason, and he was sure it was where he'd find the plumber. The plan proved to be in vain however, as the ice suddenly shattered and the robot's hand was freed. It would have tried to crush the heterochromatic teen again most likely if it wasn't for the sudden violent barrage of energy discs that exploded against its face, causing the machine to stumble back. "Throw it off balance, Todoroki." He didn't need to be told twice, ice quickly starting to spread all down the right side of the metallic monstrosity. The second a pause came between the magic barrage, Hamura tried to throw Todoroki off of him, smashing through some of the ice and bashing his fist off the wall hard, causing it to crack and begin to crumble. "Get off it now!" Gwen cried out, and the fire and ice teen did as the pro said, running and jumping down, ice continuing to form on the robot which he used to slide down to safety at the same time, leaping off at the last moment to the ground, rolling and creating the last of the ice needed to fully freeze up the robot's right side. The last of Gwen's barrage came in fast and hard, causing the massive machine to tumble back, turning as it fell and crashing straight through the wall, smashing hard into the ground as the debris of the wall collapsed all around it and Hamura fell out onto the floor, groaning. Both Gwen and Todoroki quickly took stock of the next room, surprised to see that Izuku was there, a blaster being held to a fallen plumber, presumably the final group of aliens, all hurrying onto one of the final ships to escape. Midoriya! There you are! Izuku just chuckled, scratching the back of his neck with his free hand as he took in the sheer size of the robot. Not difficult, huh? You're something else, Todoroki. The stoic teen just hummed, barely reacting. Izuku turned his gaze to Hamura with a more serious expression as he heard the final ship beginning to leave. And there it is, it's all over, Hamura. No. Yes. Every innocent alien is free and going home, all your plumber friends have been taken out and you're outnumbered and outmatched. Gwen said as her hands glowed, ready to react in case he tried anything. So make this easier on everyone and just give up. I didn't spend my entire life preparing for it to end so easily. Hamura growled, gripping the ground. Izuku was about to make a comment when he saw black fur beginning to spread around the plumber's arms. Look out! Then, the man let out a feral roar as three massive claws sprouted one either of his hands and he bolted forward, going from all fours to his feet rapidly, running faster than any normal person could possibly hope to. Hamura had finally decided to use his quirk. No! Get back here! Gwen shouted, throwing energy blasts after the man that just missed. Izuku looked down and gritted his teeth, seeing he was still timed out. No time to waste. One for all, plus ultra base. He bolted forward at speeds that were at least equal with Hamura's, lightning bursting off him as he rapidly made his way to the end of the hangar. Midoriya? Todoroki shouted out, the most shocked Izuku had ever heard him so far at seeing the green-haired teen use a power in his human form. Hamura reached the end of the hangar seconds before Izuku, making a massive leap into the air and landing on the ship with the final escaping aliens, his desperation showing. Izuku landed on the same ship a moment later, running over to the back of the ship and appearing in front of Hamura, delivering a roundhouse kick to the plumber's face just before he could try to tear into the cockpit. The now half-man, half-monster was thrown back onto the wing of the ship, before he let out a howl and bolted forward, trying to tear Izuku open. The freckle-faced teen barely had time to react, jumping back slightly just in time to avoid having his vital organs suddenly thrown off into the sea. Izuku struck back, fist connecting with the plumber's face and making him twist from the impact, but he twirled around completely, coming in for a strike with his claws and forcing Izuku to have to grab them, making him let out a cry of pain as he felt multiple cuts open up. Acting quick, he swept the man's feet out from under him and delivered a strike to the chest, throwing him away. Unfortunately, before he could even try to pull up the Omnitrix, Hamura was on his feet again and launched at him, trying to slice his legs into pieces. Izuku leapt into the air, which very nearly went horribly for him as the laws of physics took over and he landed on the back of the ship, having to quickly run back right into a claw assault he barely managed to slide under, striking Hamura down below as he did so. R.A. U-B-R-A-A at. He screamed, turning and coming in again for yet another attack. He threw out both his hands, bringing both claws down towards each other. Damn it! He's giving me no room to breathe and check the Omnitrix. It must be charged by now, but that means nothing if I can't get a second to use it. Have to end this right now. Reacting at almost the last possible second, Izuku grabbed both sets of claws as tight as he could with his arms crossing each other to grab the claws, ignoring the cuts that opened on his other hand or the ones that were suddenly aching with more pain as he stared straight into the beast's eyes, and used all his strength to snap the plumber's claws in half. Rarg! Izuku kicked Hamura in the chest while he was distracted, howling in pain, causing the furry villain to leave the ground and fly towards the back of the ship, while Izuku lifted up the Omnitrix to quickly scroll through his selections. Fortunately, it only took 2 tries before the perfect alien showed up while Hamura began to stand. Izuku wasted no time pressing in the selection, his entire form being engulfed in a green flash before Enhance stood tall. This has been a good fight and all, Hamura, but I think I can enhance this situation. Hamura roared, using his remaining claws to try to strike the alien only for Enhance to turn into a puddle of liquid metal before he spread across the entire ship, turning it black with green stripes. Weaponry raised on all sides of the wing, pelting the plumber with hundreds upon hundreds of dull shells. After a couple of moments, the constant impacts took their toll and Hamura finally collapsed on the wing. Izuku held him there with some metal trappings while his single eye moved inside the ship, finding the group of aliens inside. The Volpomancer, Volan and Gourmand he'd gotten DNA from were all inside, the Volan inside a tub made out of crystals like crystallizes, filled with water. Izuku looked around to see the two other aliens inside was the alien that looked like crystallized. JJ had told him was a Petrosapian, who was controlling the ship, and beside him, a Sonicarian. WHATSGO on? The short silicone-suited alien asked, looking up at Izuku. Don't worry about it. Hamura tried to hitch a ride, but he's out of it now. Exterior of the ship took some minor damage but shouldn't be anything that will cause major issues, I don't think. He explained. Only thing, any of you got a way for me to take him back to the base without interrupting your flight? I'd rather he had no chance of waking up near any of you. I saw some hoverboards in the back of the ship. The Gourmand spoke up, pointing behind him. If you're using a mechamorph, should be good enough, right? That's perfect. Thanks guys. I hope that whatever happens next for you all, it goes well. We hope so too. Thank you for everything. The Volan said, and the Volpomancer let out a roar of agreement. No problem. Hope I won't be rescuing you again anytime soon. With that, Izuku disappeared into the back of the ship, opening the cargo ramp at the back for him to leave. He spotted the hoverboard, melting into it and dropping out into the sky. The ramp closed once he was out, presumably the Petrosapians doing, leaving Izuku to fly up towards the wing where he saw Hamura starting to slip off. He quickly flew up to the man, pulling him on and holding him tightly, before he turned, created boosters at the back of the board and blasted off. Despite how far out they went, it only took Izuku about a minute to return to the plumber base, flying into the hangar and letting the man go flying across the hangar. He let go of the hoverboard, grabbing it and tapping the symbol on his chest a few times, turning back to normal. Gwen and Todoroki had clearly been preparing for his return, as the redhead had a rope on her and had immediately tied the man up once Izuku showed up, so he wouldn't disappear again. Izuku flinched slightly seeing the torn-off claws, wishing he hadn't had to do something quite so violent, but decided it would be better not to dwell on it. He'd had no choice in the moment, and it wasn't like he liked doing that. With that thought, he managed to smile again as he could bask in the knowledge of a simple fact. Finally, the plumbers had been defeated for good. Alright, you charged back up? Gwen asked Izuku, who nodded, having turned back a few minutes ago. She smiled. Perfect, you can round up the last of the plumbers, and then I can use the reality stone to take them back to my dimension to be tried properly for their crimes. Huh? Aren't most of them from this dimension, thought? Izuku checked, tilting his head confused. The redhead chuckled and waved her hand casually, as if literally waving his concern away. Don't worry. Dimension travel, where I'm from, isn't the hardest thing to pull off, especially when you have a cousin with an Omnitrix and connections. Gwen assured with a kind chuckle. We can have them tried under a system that will recognize their crimes, and delivered back to serve an appropriate punishment here. I'll get in touch if I can to let you know what happens. Now, I just need you to get the reality stone for me and we can get this show on the road. Izuku nodded and pushed down the selection, a green flash engulfing him before Blink stood in his place, his visor coming down as he rushed off in a blue and black blur. Rapidly the room began to fill with more and more unconscious and tied-up plumbers, and after a few seconds the pile-up eventually stopped with Izuku standing in front of them, turning back to normal. That's all the ones I could find. And here, one reality stone present and accounted for. He handed over the large stone orb, which had several carvings and embossings in it. It was about the size of a dodgeball and was a completely washed-out gray color. Gwen nodded approvingly as she backed off while Izuku and Todoroki moved a little bit away from her. Good. Now both of you be safe, alright? I'll try, but he's gonna break that promise. Todoroki said in his usual monotone but with an almost friendly teasing hint to it, surprising Izuku, who pouted for a moment before chuckling. I wanna be mad, but he's not wrong. Gwen rolled her eyes good-naturedly and let out a sigh that almost seemed to be fond. Just like Ben. She muttered more to herself than anyone before looking up and giving him a serious look. One thing though, Midoriya. We'll meet again, I'm sure, and in the meantime, you better take good care of Yayo and treat her right. I may not have known her for as long as I'd like, but I know she's a nice girl who deserves to be treated well. If I find out you didn't, I'll have an energy disc with your name on it waiting for you. All right. Izuku gulped at her tone, giving a mock salute. I'll make sure to treat her amazing. Good. Make that date a good one. Her serious expression faded to amusement and she began to lift the stone up, before pausing in thought. Actually, before I go, could you do something for me? Huh? What is it? He blinked confused and she put the stone down for a moment, walking over to him. Would you mind going into your feedback form? She asked, before giving a sheepish laugh at his blank look. Sorry, forgot you wouldn't have necessarily called it that. The conductoid form you got from Tessa. Oh right. Can do. He nodded, quickly scrolling through his forms and landing on the one Gwen had asked for, pushing in the watch. A moment later, said alien was now standing before her with a grin, his voice sounding as though it had an electrical charge to it. I was personally thinking of calling it Voltaic. Voltaic? That's a good name. The redhead laughed before tilting her head. And what exactly was that whole blue coat thing earlier when you helped us at street level then? 'Cause my cousin's never done that before. Oh. That's a new thing I've learned how to do. He laughed, focusing as said blue coat started to appear and his single green eye glowed brightly. One for all, plus ultra. I'm calling it plus ultra forms, it makes each of my forms stronger. Interesting. Gwen hummed, seemingly scanning him over with her powers. My cousin used to be able to do something similar, but this seems like a far more humane version of it. How'd you do it? Honestly, I'm not sure yet. Must be something the Omnitrix I have just has available in this universe. He covered quickly, hoping that would satisfy Todoroki as well regarding what he'd done earlier. Gwen hummed, seeming to accept it and went to say something else but before she could. Look out! Todoroki's voice came along with a barrage of ice suddenly ripping across the room that was blown up, allowing Gwen and Izuku to see a plumber had woken up and slipped out of the ropes, rushing for the reality stone. No! Gwen let out a panicked cry, lifting her hands to throw an energy disc, but Izuku was faster, raising both hands and firing off a one-for-all energy blast right at the plumber, who was mere inches from the reality stone, which part of the blast hit. There was a sudden eruption and a shockwave that threw him backwards into the wall. He dropped and groaned, looking up and seeing that the plumber was knocked out. Gwen checked the orb quick before sighing in relief. Oh, thank God. She sighed, before turning to him. I appreciate the reasoning, but be more careful next time. You could have blown it up. You're right, you're right. Izuku pushed himself up, stretching and waving his arms around, letting himself loosen up. I'm sorry. I'll be more careful next time. Well, hopefully the next time won't come. Gwen sighs, before tilting her head at him confused. He tilted his head back. Something wrong? Nothing, just, you seem more comfortable now somehow. She hummed and he laughed, shrugging. Guess shockwaves are good for helping you loosen up. He joked, only to get unimpressed stares from both of them. He shrugged sheepishly. Sorry. So, you'll have everything under control from here on out? Yes, I think everything will be just fine. Gwen nodded as she used her magic to more thoroughly lock all the plumbers in place, picking up the orb and turning around. All jokes and threats aside, it really was nice getting to know you. Until next time. He smiled and waved while Todoroki nodded as her eyes turned pure pink and the stone glowed green, before a sudden white flash overtook the room, making both teens close their eyes. When they opened them again, the room was empty save for the two of them. It's finally over. Todoroki observed and Izuku nodded with a relieved sigh. Now what? Huh? Well, what we did was morally right, I believe that. But legally, I'm not sure we'd have as much as a case, especially with all the witnesses gone. If anyone comes in here and finds security footage, or a villain finds this tech. I got an idea. Izuku assured, before absorbing all the electricity from the air around him in arc, his fingers charging up. Come on, there's only one exit, so let's get out of here. Right. And your idea? I'll blow up the elevator shaft when we're near the top and we'll get out of there. Maybe you can freeze it over as well to be safe, so that anyone who arrives here won't be able to get inside. If anyone finds us leaving and tries to question us, we can just claim we heard explosions and stuff, which would roughly be corroborated with any witnesses, and try to check it out in case something was amiss. Izuku explained. It's not perfect, but it should work fine enough until we can talk to Nizu about this. Works for me. Todoroki shrugged as they took an elevator up to the top floor in silence, waiting. Once they reached the main room, they walked out to the platform and began rising. Say the word and I'll make the ice. All right. He nodded, aiming. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. He fired off the blast he'd been charging the whole way up. Boom! The shaft beneath exploded, stopped only by Todoroki's ice, which barely contained the blast and sent it backwards into the actual complex, which caused them to nearly lose their balance from the rumbling, the destruction of the area ringing in their ears. Of course, only the main room and the first few floors would be destroyed, nothing down lower, but still, the way in had been closed off, and once the platform finally reached the street outside and two teens stepped off, they could be certain no one would accidentally stumble upon the base again. Right. Todoroki nodded, satisfied. Come on, there's a bag with hospital gowns nearby. We'll get changed and get back to the hospital before anyone knows we've done anything other than wander about. Right. Young Midoriya and Todoroki are here. All Might yelled as the boys stepped into hospital, both jumping in surprise. All Might? Izuku asked in surprise, looking around to see both Ida and Momo awake and curious, although for some reason Momo was blushing and looked sheepish. Indeed it is I. Here to take you and young Yaoyorozu home once you're discharged. He laughed, before calming down. But seeing as it's only us, tell me, how did it go? Gwen took the plumbers back to her universe with her. They're going to face trial under people who actually care about aliens and crimes against them, then be returned here while being dealt whatever punishment is decided. Todoroki answered first, going to sit down on his bed to rest. Izuku just took a chair nearby inside. I helped free all the aliens, got a few new forms, and destroyed the entrance to the base so no one is using it anytime soon. Izuku confirmed, making everyone sigh in relief. It's troubling to think such a thing would be happening under the heroes' noses. Ida frowned and Izuku nodded. Very. I don't know if there's more out there somewhere though, so we should be on the lookout for anything like that in the future. I'll be sure to spread the word, my boy. All Might nodded, before sighing. Now I do not wish to upset anyone or upset Yaoyorozu again. Izuku blinked in confusion at that one as Momo seemed to become even more sheepish. But as your teacher I do have to express concern over this. I do wish you had tried to contact me first. You could have gotten in so much trouble if you were caught. There wasn't any time. Izuku frowned, looking up with a conviction the others didn't expect him to use on All Might. I couldn't just sit here and wait while there were that many people in need of help, and a lack of a hero license makes no difference. Innocent lives are saved, and that's all I care about. Ida and Todoroki both looked at him with mixtures of surprise and, maybe, admiration? While Momo definitely had admiration as she beamed at him, but also relief for some reason. All Might paused for a moment before surprising them all by chuckling. You really do have a hero's heart, young Midoriya. Very well, that is an argument I cannot argue with, and apparently it seems you're rubbing off on young Yaoyorozu as well. He laughed, causing the girl to immediately go back to blushing. I can't imagine she would have yelled at the chief of police otherwise. Why you what? Izuku turned to Momo, shocked, and even Todoroki's eyes widened in surprise slightly. He wouldn't stop going on about punishments and laws, and all I could think about was the idea of the two of you out there risking your lives to do the right thing only to come back to someone going to try to punish us all for a situation that was beyond most of our control. Ida winced at the word most. And I may have lost my temper a tad. I just couldn't stand it. Izuku blinked before standing up and walking over to her, hugging her. She blinked in surprise before returning the embrace. Thank you, but you didn't need to risk getting yourself in trouble like that. It wasn't just that, seeing you and Todoroki do the right thing, I guess. It just led me to realize why I like you, and like All Might said, what gives you your heroic heart? Momo rambled a tad. The fact that you'd do the right thing, regardless of whether it was the lawful thing. I've never thought like that before, but... Izuku just hugged her tighter. There was a tender silence for a moment until Todoroki deadpanned at them. If you're going to get mushy, at least close the curtains so we don't have to see you kiss. They both went nuclear as Ida whipped around, ignoring All Might's boisterous laughter. Todoroki! That is incredibly inappropriate. You want to watch them suck faces? No. Then I stand by my original statement. Todoroki shrugged, making Ida sputter. Now my boy, I'm sure they're not at that stage yet. All Might laughed, throwing in a wink that made both Izuku and Momo want to melt from embarrassment. In all seriousness though, you should be discharged in about an hour. I am here to take young Midoriya and Yaoyorozu back to UA to sort out their internship situations. Endeavor will both be in touch soon to take both young Todoroki back to his agency, and young Ida will remain here to heal. They all nodded in understanding. Aside from that, it was decided that so long as you do not publicize the fight with Stain, it will be accredited solely to Miss Tennyson and Endeavor. I would also recommend not bringing up the plumbers with anyone you don't need to, as if the information regarding that is leaked, I have no idea what the results might be. Hopefully it would be brushed off as some conspiracy with no basis, but... All Might trailed off, as they could all fill in the blanks themselves. That is everything, I believe. I will be back with a car in an hour for both Midoriya and Yaoyorozu. Any questions? I have one. Todoroki piped up, drawing everyone's attention as he turned to Izuku. In the hangar, what was with the green dash? Izuku went wide-eyed and quickly shook his head. Not right now. I'll explain when we're back at UA with everyone, but I want it to be a surprise, okay? Fine. Todoroki shrugged while both Ida and Momo looked at Izuku curious, who just shook his head. Ida tried to use a stern face and Momo a pout to get him to crack, but neither succeeded. Well, I will see you all soon. Now. Justice awaits. With that, All Might took off into a sprint, only for shouting to suddenly ring out down the halls a minute later from a nurse reprimanding the man for shouting and risking running into a patient, making the students laugh. Izuku moved to get up, only to be tugged back down and feel Momo's hug tighten. Why Momo? He asked, confused. Sorry, just let me have this for a minute. She said quietly, holding on. We could hear the explosions from here, I was really worried. He frowned and returned the hug, ignoring the heat in his cheeks. I'm okay. He'd planned to get up once she felt better, but instead they stayed like that for the whole hour, just comforting each other and eventually smiling, Ida ignoring the scene respectfully while Todoroki occasionally surprised them with his ability to make them laugh by pretending to be grossed out by their PDA. If Izuku could, he'd happily live in this moment forever. The walk to the car was quiet for the most part, but not an awkward quiet. Just a comfortable silence as Izuku and Momo walked side by side with their teacher just ahead of them, enjoying the presence and atmosphere without worry, without care. No villains, no aliens, no big situation around the corner, they could take 5 minutes to themselves and just breathe and be happy. It was nice. Izuku absent-mindedly counted the number of quirks he saw as they walked past. 2 fire quirks, 6 earth quirks and 4 telekinetic quirks was his count for recurring ones. He was secretly hoping he'd see a water one next so that all 4 classic elements would be present. As he mused on this silly silent thought, he felt a warmth and slight pressure in his hand, causing him to look down and feel his face heat up a tad as he realized Momo had taken his hand, a small shy smile on her own face as she squeezed. He smiled shyly as well, squeezing back and moving just a little bit closer to her as they walked into the reception area, heading for the door. He was gonna get to do this now, he realized. He could hold Momo's hand almost every day like this and just enjoy it from now. No internships to get in the way, no awkward situations with Ida making it feel inappropriate. They could just show their affection for one another like this now. Now that was a really nice feeling. One he was gonna cherish as much as he could. As they stepped out into the cold and he committed every detail to memory. The slight shiver of both of them. The way he tensed slightly until Momo's touch made him relax, how she leaned in to keep more of his warmth and avoid the cold, and how his arms sunk into her. Well, he did say every detail. Momo opened the car door before he could get it, climbing in and moving to the far seat, Izuku following in behind her and closing the door behind him, both strapping in as All Might took the wheel, which was well, quite frankly, the sight was hilarious. He was a 7-foot-tall hulking giant of a man trying to fit into what was basically just an SUV. Albeit a somewhat sized-up SUV, but as he used his muscle form he was still needing to hunker down and tuck his arms in. Momo clearly was trying not to giggle, not wanting to be rude, but Izuku couldn't help his own amused smile. He still appreciated All Might, but moments like these were also a nice sort of respite for the more agonizing moments on Dagobah Beach. Shaking his head, he thought over things as the car began to drive into the night, thinking about things like how classes were going to be going back, how he was gonna explain to his class, hey, I have like 3 new aliens now, how he was absolutely squeezing the life out of JJ when they got back and being thankful the plumbers had no idea about her, and finally, the date he and Momo had been waiting to go on for ages. They finally had their chance. In fact, he took her hand again, squeezing and getting her to turn, a soft smile on her face at the action, her shy smile growing along with her small blush. A sight that he had a feeling he would see a lot, a fact that made his heart beat just a tad faster as it surged with happiness from the idea. He leaned in and noticing, Momo leaned in too, curious as he leaned to her ear and said quietly, I have an idea for that date. If you're up for it. I'm sure whatever it is will be amazing. She replied quietly, softly, squeezing his hand again, and nodded. Even if it's just a walk around town, I'll like it, I bet. He giggled and turned back to looking forward, although he couldn't bring himself to lean away from her yet. He caught All Might's eye in the rear-view mirror, his mentor grinning stupidly with a teasing glint in his gaze. He was gonna be teased to hell, but he was frankly more than okay with that, because it was just another reminder this was real and he was one hell of a lucky guy. Ah, Mr. Midoriya, Miss Yaoyorozu, it's good to see you both are well. Mizu exclaimed happily with a clap of his paws when the 2 students were let into the principal's office by All Might, bowing their heads as they entered and getting a nod from the hybrid creature in return. I hear your internships were quite eventful. That's... well, it's definitely one word for it. Izuku scratched his cheek with a finger, before sighing. Definitely prematurely ended. Certainly, and I must apologize to you both on behalf of UA. Mizu declared, jumping on his desk and bowing, to the surprise of the 2 students. We are out of our depth in regards to these aliens, and as a result, we had allowed you to go to an organization claiming knowledge without doing as many checks into them as we should have. It was short notice, but that is no excuse for one of our students ending up in harm's way. I also understand that while it is not public record, I have both of you to thank, along with Mr. Todoroki, for ensuring that we did not lose one of our students. The principal hummed, straightening up with a more somber smile. I wish he had not been in such a situation in the first place, but, while I may be expected to scold you, I find I must thank you instead. So thank you I shall. I also must say sorry to you, young Yaoyorozu, as we also allowed you to join something which nearly led you into something far beyond what high school students should be involved in. I appreciate the gesture, sir, but I am afraid I cannot accept an apology. Momo decided, putting a hand to her chest with a more confident look. Miss Tennyson, while she may have had ulterior motives, still cared about me and taught me valuable skills I would not have gained without her. She helped provide me with exactly what I needed from these internships, so please, do not apologize for that. Izuku smiled at her, glad to hear the legitimate confidence and even happiness in her voice. It really did sound like Gwen's internship had done her a world of good. Unfortunately, there was a bit of a shakiness at the end that threw it slightly, and he worried about that, but he promised he'd handle it later. For now. Sir, I accept your apology regarding me, but no one could have known but the plumbers. Even I'm working in the dark, and with Gwen gone, it will continue to be that way. Speaking of, I have to ask. What will happen to me and Yamamo's internships? He wondered, lifting up and looking at the principal with curiosity. After all, I don't think capturing a super evil organization / being a super evil organization and hopping to a different universe really fits in the bounds of being kicked out of the internship. Nizu did manage a chuckle from that line, hopping off the desk and putting his arms behind his back as he paced, humming. Well, we are just waiting on a phone back from Miss Yaoruzu's parents, but most likely you will both stay on UA grounds for the rest of the week. You will do personal training together, improving your skills or otherwise just practicing in our facilities, as well as perhaps tackle later coursework early. And the situation with the plumbers? Izuku couldn't help but wonder. Nizu sighed and his demeanor seemed to become less enthusiastic as his pacing slowed and he turned to them. I find we will likely have to keep a large amount of the details surrounding the plumbers highly classified, even from people like your homeroom teacher. While he may now be aware of the existence of aliens and that the plumbers were not good people, this kind of situation requires a delicate handle, one that will ensure as little people as possible can accidentally spread details of these situations, lest the wrong sources hear about it. This will also make the reports Aizawa has to give have more credit to them, such as the lie that will have to be crafted about Miss Tennyson's death. The hybrid seemed to be partially ranting at this point as both students went wide-eyed and turned to each other, shock written on their faces as they processed that. Logically it made sense, using death as a way to explain the very sudden disappearance of a good pro, but it had certainly caught them off guard. Aside from that, the plumbers will be explained as a villainous organization that had managed to very realistically hide as heroes, and their disappearance was due to a combination of Mr. Midoriya's diligence and attentive nature and in part Miss Tennyson's preceding knowledge, leading to an unintended but fortunate team-up that led to Miss Tennyson's death, but not before she provided Mr. Midoriya the means to permanently drive out the villain group with her permission. Izuku looked up in shock, surprised by the complete reversal of how it was compared to the Stain situation. No getting in trouble and instead getting the credit? He frowned. Gwen was the reason we knew the plumbers were evil. She's the one who fought Hamura with Todoroki, and it was her plan we followed that saved everyone. He said simply. My name shouldn't be in there, just an unnamed student. Izuku? Are you quite sure? Both Momo and Nizu blinked at him in surprise, clearly having not expected that response. The principal seemed to pause as he studied him. You do realize, Mr. Midoriya, that by virtue of your name being mentioned, this would not only be likely to help draw attention away from any negative comments in regards to your involvement with the Stain incident, but also provide excellent public press for you that could very likely help bolster your career going forward? I'm certain. Izuku said simply, not wanting to get into the why. Please don't put my name in any public versions of that report. Well, if that's what you wish, then I'm not able to go against that. Nizu sighed with a nod, before turning to Momo. As for you, Miss Yaoruzu, I will need to keep you for a few minutes to explain what will happen if your parents agree to let you stay. In the meantime, I suggest Midoriya returns to his safe house on campus and see his mother and JJ, as they both wish to ensure his safety. Yes, sir. Izuku nodded, not noticing Momo's somewhat concerned look she sent his way as he walked off into the hall, smiling despite himself as he thought about what he was about to do next. He hoped Momo would like this. Snowpoint Tower was a skyscraper building located in Training City B of UA's facilities, near the back far from where the usual fights took place, and even if one would draw near, there would be no damage brought to the structure as it had an energy field protecting it from any such attacks, the only way to get in being the front door. It stood as tall as the Burj Khalifa itself, having been based on said building, making it the tallest thing within 7 surrounding prefectures, the main difference being the massive spherical protrusion at the top, a lounge of sorts. It was intended for the third years of UA mainly, for learning how to handle fights in locations with massive structures that may be risked to civilian safety as well as how to avoid damaging famous landmarks. The school very likely could have settled for making it just a few meters taller than the other buildings in the city, but as this was UA, they had gone for their usual creed of go big or go home and had replicated the largest pre-quirk building they could manage. It had many supposed features and purposes beyond just being a building in the training city, of course, but Izuku had interest in only one feature of Snowpoint Tower tonight. As he rode the elevator all the way to the top floor, a wicker basket in hand and his best casual clothes quickly picked out. He walked out into the lounge and headed straight for the ladder, opening a hatch and stepping outside, coming out into the chilly night air where he saw Momo ahead wrapped up in a cozy-looking red turtleneck and very comfortable and thick black leggings. Her outfit was completed with a nice white jacket and dark beige boots with faux fur lining the inside. She turned as she heard the hatch open and giggled to herself as she put a finger to her lips, smiling. "You really know how to pick a locale, Midoku." Izuku paused. "Midoku," he blinked and the girl blushed before moving both hands up to her now more brightly blushing face. "I apologize. That sounded less silly in my head," she said quickly, pressing her face into her hands. You call me Yamamo and I felt Midoriya was too formal after everything we've been through, but I didn't want to be rude and use your first name without permission, and I wanted a nickname that was unique, but Dory sounded silly in my head and dash." Izuku couldn't help it. He started to giggle, which made her frantic explaining stop abruptly, causing her to look up in confusion as he walked over and hugged her. "I love it," he said simply. "But you probably shouldn't emulate my muttering as well." "Then Midoku it is," she said with a blush after a moment, sighing in relief before giggling. "I really did sound like you when you get excited, didn't I?" He nodded, beaming at her. It was adorable. "Well, of course," she said, in a very well-done kind of voice. "I was emulating you, of course I would sound adorable." "Why Yamomo?" He whined as his face went red from the unexpected flirt, making her giggle more as she turned and sat down on the roof, smiling at the bright twinkling stars of the night sky. "Can I ask you a question?" she asked suddenly, and he blinked confused, following her gaze into the sky as he sat down beside her. "Sure." "Why did you really turn down Principal Nizu's offer?" she asked, simple and straightforward. Not with any hard edge, just curiosity and concern. "I said I didn't want to take the credit Gwen deserved." "Yes, you said that, but did you mean the credit you think you don't deserve?" she asked, turning to him with a frown, and he froze, before frowning himself and looking down. The nail had been struck on the head. "I was tricked by them. I was the one who failed to notice straight away that innocent people were locked up right in front of my eyes and that villains were talking me into joining them every day. How do I live with that? What kind of hero completely fails to notice the villains right in front of them?" He gritted his teeth as he gently opened the basket, but didn't immediately reach for any food. "The kind that sees the best in everyone?" Momo hazarded a guess, picking up a warm thermos from the basket filled with soup. "You don't see the bad in people, Izuku. You were still calling Bakuga Kaken when you came to UA, and while you don't anymore, and I have a lot of issues I wish to confront regarding that, it speaks to you and the fact that you really will see the best in anyone. You got through to Todoroki and you went out your way to take in JJ, even if it was a promise. You're the kind of person who believes in doing good things and seeing the goodness of others, even if no one else sees it. Yes, maybe you were tricked, but that makes them the bad guys, not you." Her hand had once more found his, but this time when she squeezed it, it felt like it carried a lot more in that squeeze than the ones from before. All her reassurance and belief, somehow conveyed in one tiny action. He bit his lip, looking up to her. "And what about when we finally did find out?" "When we finally did find out, you went and fought off a whole organization full of people you had trusted and had betrayed you, saving countless innocent lives, single-handedly fighting your way to safety and leading them to freedom, before being the last one to take on a villain desperate and at the end of his rope. You're beating yourself up when you really do deserve praise, Izuku. I mean it." She pulled him into a sort of half-hug, resting her chin atop his head with a sigh. You did amazing, and I don't think anyone could have asked better of you for the situation you found yourself in. You did your best and your best was good enough. Thank you. It was quiet and slightly strained, because it was hard to say but he did, leaning further into the hug and latching onto her, not realizing how much he needed to hear that. Thank you. She gently planted a kiss on his head, making him blush furiously as it was the first one she had given him, and yet he felt a dumb dopey smile spread on his face from it. A squeak surprised them both and they whipped around to see JJ standing there, the hatch half open as she tried to spy on them with a camcorder. Have a lovely night, B. She yelped as she jumped down the ladder and ran, leaving the two lovers to turn to each other before giggling at the alien's antics. You know, we never got that picture from Gwen. Momo hummed and he chuckled, nodding. Yeah, I guess we didn't. He hummed, before he frowned and looked at her properly. Yeah, Momo. When you were saying how good your internship was for you, you were pretty confident, until the end, your voice kind of shook a bit. Can I ask why? She looked away and he sighed, frown deepening. I talked to you, please talk to me. He requested softly as he took her hands and squeezed them like she'd squeezed his. She let out a small sigh of her own, turning back with sadder eyes that made him just want to hold onto her and never let go. Do you remember after my match with Tokoyami my confidence took a hit, but you came rushing in and helped try to keep it from shattering? She questioned and he nodded, both smiling slightly at the memory. Well, it was still shaky but you helped keep it from breaking. Then I went to my internship and she showed me how to utilize powers in ways I'd never considered but also helped me apply ideas, though concepts to help me continue to improve even after she was gone. You saw the move I used against Stain. Again he nodded, beaming this time. Yeah, that was super awesome and amazing by the way. I didn't realize kinetic energy could be imparted as a creation, but I had a theory elemental things might be possible. Combining them though for a super powerful water spray was genius and I don't know just how powerful you probably are now. It's amazing. He gushed, making her blush and smile softly, although she hid that smile behind a hand, before it faded somewhat. Still. I still ended up getting stuck in the hospital. I nearly got taken out, then I couldn't do anything to help you, Gwen and Todoroki. It was so scary knowing you were fighting, and I was just lying in bed feeling useless. I developed new ways to use my quirk and I was still just sitting around because I hadn't been able to do it fast enough, because I failed to end a fight again. I was just sitting around, unable to help, while you could have been dying for all I knew, and then there was the fact I encouraged you to go. And then dash. Izuku wasn't sure what he was thinking when he moved, he just did, his lips locking with Momo's, cutting her off and making her go wide-eyed. There was a moment of hesitation before she started to kiss back, her own arms wrapping around Izuku's neck. They two stayed just kissing for a moment, their heads exploding with shocked euphoria from the sensation, although there was also pain and awkwardness as neither had done this before, their heads occasionally hitting each other or pressing too hard and feeling each other's teeth. Nevertheless, by the time they pulled apart, they were short of breath and staring at each other, Momo with shocked delight and Izuku with adoration as he put a hand to her cheek, a part of him screaming inside because holy shit, he really did just do that. Don't call yourself useless. He said simply, resting his forehead against hers and humming. You're not even slightly useless. You're potentially the most powerful person in this school, and I'm including the teachers and my aliens in that. You just had some bad luck. Do you know there was a saying going around hero forums for years? The person makes the quirk, not the other way around? People forget it, I think, because we focus so much on flashy quirks nowadays, but it's how we choose to use them that defines how good they are and how useful they are. Tokoyami and Stain are both very fast fighters, using powerful direct and immediate force, but they're also incredibly predictable when you know their go-to move. The latter not as much, but still. And me, she asked as she bit her lip, not sure where this could possibly be going. You're a genius, you're focused, you're driven, you're amazing. He said it so assuredly and confidently that it was impossible to argue with. Yes, you were overwhelmed by Tokoyami's strength one time, Stain's tactics one time, but both were incredibly specific scenarios. You didn't lose because Tokoyami won that fight. He actively went for pushing you out because to actually fight you might have been more than he could handle, when you know what you're doing. Stain, hell you did beat him as far as I'm concerned. You're incredible, Yamamo, and I don't think I'd feel more safe with anyone by my side than you in a fight. So no, you're not useless. She sniffled slightly and Izuku winced, worried he'd said something wrong only for her to grab him tight. But, I could have lost you. He hated how shaky her voice got, how scared it sounded. Again, as so soon after Vilgax and Dash. And you didn't. You helped me realize I needed to switch sides and you were part of what I was looking forward to coming back to. I know these kinds of misadventures weren't exactly what either of us signed up for so soon into joining UA, and I don't think they'll stop anytime soon. There's more to this all than we realized, and in some ways, I think I have to be the one who takes it all on. There's more to do than we could have possibly known, but I promise I'll always come back to you. I promise. She sniffled again, pulling away and looking at him, clearly struggling to hold back tears as she gave him a concerned and anxious look. How can you promise that? He paused, frowning as he looked down. Almost anything would sound cheap in response to that, but he couldn't let it go unanswered, couldn't let Momo keep suffering this apparent fear she had inside. His eyes drifted to the Omnitrix and he got an idea, smiling as he lifted it up and quickly scrolled to one of the new forms, pressing it in. In a green flash, there appeared a giant four-legged orange-skinned alien much like some kind of alien dog, with no eyes, sharp teeth, black lips, and little slits in either side of its neck, the Omnitrix symbol resting on its chest. It let out a small roar, one quiet so as not to scare Momo, who was wide-eyed at the new form, before suddenly it leapt at her, and began nuzzling right into her like a cat, purring and making her laugh as his fur tickled her. She gently wrapped her arms around his neck as his tongue lolled out, and he panted as she scratched him just like an actual puppy, nuzzling more into her and nearly lifting her up, with her tears starting to fade as she just laughed happily and loudly. Once he felt satisfied, the creature pressed the symbol with one of its paws thrice and he returned to human form, a bright smile on his face as he pointed at her beaming face. I can promise, because letting that smile die? That's a crime I will never, ever commit. He said, with all the seriousness he could muster. Her own smile lessened slightly, but not in a bad way, more just in a way that it relaxed as she took his hands again. The girls were right, you are a dork. She giggled and he laughed, scratching the back of his head. And proud of it. He said confidently, reaching into the basket and offering her a sandwich she found inside, which she took gratefully, the two settling into eating with dopey smiles and happy thoughts, laughing and loving each other's company without any more emotional heart-to-hearts, until they finally ran out and just cuddled up together under the stars. When Momo finally fell asleep on his shoulders, a tired Izuku just smiled, and with just one for all, he gently brought them down into the safety of the lounge so they didn't roll off the roof in their sleep, setting them both down onto a sofa large enough for them both. A part of him felt he should maybe move to the other sofa and give her some space to be safe, but his tired body protested the idea of any more movement, the emotional and physical toll of the whole day finally catching up, preventing him from even having the energy to let go of her. So he just held on tight, closing his eyes to rest them for a minute. He could move once he was rested up, or maybe he'd just stay and keep holding on to the greatest thing in his life to make sure she was definitely real. Yeah, that sounded perfect. It was with that thought, his grip tightened just a bit and he drifted off to the land of dreams, the smile never fading from his face.
That's it for today. Remember to show your support to the creator of this story if you enjoyed it. If you would like more parts of the story to be uploaded, leave a comment and subscribe to get notified when the story continues. Bye-bye for now, and I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day.